Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Luxury Reality. Today we're going to be talking about 5 alternatives to the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. So 5 alternatives to the Royal Oak. Now first off, let's get wristwatch check out of the way nice and early. Today we've got the Seamaster back on its Bond NATO strap. It's still pretty hot here in Santiago, so I keep most of my watches on either the bracelet or a NATO because it's just too sweaty for leather, pretty much. But let's get into this list. Now a couple notes before I get started. The first one being that this isn't going to be in a particular order because since this is a watch that I haven't actually bought yet, so I haven't gone through the paces in the same way that I did in my previous alternatives video about when I actually bought my Seamaster. The second note is I'm not going to be including the Vacheron Constantin Overseas or the Patek Philippe Nautilus. I stayed away from those because they're too obvious and because they're not really that much more accessible when you put it into perspective. But anyway, let's get into the list and get into the ones that are, in my opinion, good alternatives to it. Now the first watch on my list is the Hublot Classic Fusion Titanium on a bracelet. The reference 510.NX 1170.NX. Now, spoiler alert, this entire list is full of extra long reference numbers. It seems to be a trait of the segment. But the Hublot Classic Fusion, now it does get a lot of flack because people do say that it's a bit of a rip-off of the AP, and that's largely, I think, just because it has screws on it. And this is something that happens when you have an iconic watch like the Royal Oak. The fact of the matter is it has so many different design cues. Of course it's going to influence other designs. In my opinion, the Hublot does stand on its own 2 feet. Obviously, it is still based around the design of, a porthole, a window. Hublot means window in French. But I think that it has created its own design language, and especially look at the history of it. One of its big traits or signatures was being on a rubber strap, and you don't see people going around saying that the Yachtmaster ripped off the Classic Fusion. So I don't think personally that it's a rip-off or an homage. I think it does stand on its own 2 feet, and as a brand, as a model, they've created their own sort of iconic status in the last 15 years. So it is, in its own sense, a modern icon, and that's why I do think that it's a viable contender. On the horology side, on the sort of watch geek side, it does fall significantly short of the Audemars. It has a Sellita SW300 movement, which in itself is a clone of an ETA 2892. So it's not an in-house movement by any stretch. And for a watch that's, I think, $8,000, $8,800, thereabouts, you would want, a little bit more on the horology side to sort of justify what you're paying. Where it does deliver though, and it's what I think Hublot does best, is in terms of style and also experimenting with materials. I love when companies experiment with different materials, and Hublot is one of the kings of that. I love when watches use titanium, for example, because it's so light, but you're not compromising in terms of the structural integrity or the hardness of it, really. So, you get the best of both worlds. You get a much sturdier watch, but it's so much lighter, and you really, that lack of presence on your wrist, but you still know that you don't have something fragile. That's a really cool sensation, and that's something I really like about this watch. And in addition to that, the fact that it's an Hublot on a bracelet, not on a rubber strap, I like that it means it's going to be different from most other Hublots that you'll see. So that's why I've included it on this list as the first contender. Next on my list, we have another watch that I think sometimes is unfairly compared to the Audemars in a negative light, and that is the Maurice Lacroix Aikon. Now this watch itself, the reference AI 6008 SS002 330 1. The Aikon is actually based on Maurice Lacroix's original design from the 90s, which is the Calypso. It's a modern reinvention of it, and what they've done is they've reinvented it as a sports watch. And you can see that in the sort of claw design that they have around it. And one thing I really like about this aesthetically is that while yes, it does evoke the AP in terms of that dial especially, but if you realize the AP, one of its signature qualities is that octagonal design, whereas with the Aikon, it's actually quite a round watch, but it fools you into thinking it's got those straight edges with those claws, and I think that's a nice little play on the design that I think is actually a strength of the Aikon, not a weakness. And another thing I like about it is it does have a easy switching bracelet system, which means you can very quickly switch it on to a rubber strap or a leather strap, so you can have even more versatility for it. And that's something great, because I'm always a big proponent of watches that are designed to be all-rounders from the beginning. So when you have things like that, you know that they're designing it with versatility in mind. This is also the value proposition amongst this entire list. Valued at only $1,900 US, it's significantly cheaper than the AP, about 10% the price of it, and also cheaper than some of the other ones on this list, but you're still getting 200 meter water resistance. Now, while this isn't a dive watch alternative series, that does tell you that they've, again, thought of versatility, and that's really, I think, the highlight of this segment. The Maurice Lacroix definitely epitomizes that mentality and even takes it up a notch when you have this extended water resistance and also you have this good bracelet switching system. However, from the horology side, from the watch geek side, it does fall a bit flat because it is another Solida movement. This one's an SW200, so a clone of the ETA 2824, and obviously that does help keep its price point nice and low. So I think compared to the Hublot, for example, the Maurice Lacroix does manage to justify having a non-in-house movement because it is much more affordable. Now let's move on to the other spectrum. We've had two watches that definitely look good and definitely attack the AP from different angles. Let's look at one that takes it head on in terms of history and watch geek status, and that is the Girard Perregaux Laureato, also known as the reference 81010-11-131-11A. The Girard Perregaux Laureato was launched in 1975, so that's 3 years after the AP and 1 year before the Nautilus. So this is right at that time when integrated bracelets, that sort of porthole design, that was the language of the era. And the current Laureato obviously harks back to its own history from that time. And Girard Perregaux is a very prestigious brand in terms of its horological cachet. So this is a great alternative because you're not really compromising on the movement side, on the look side, on the pedigree side, or on the versatility. But what I really like to highlight in this one is actually its used pricing, because for some reason Girard Perregaux, or at least the Laureato, doesn't seem to hold its value very well. If you look on Chrono24, you can find them trading anywhere from as low as $5,000 US up to reselling for its retail price of $11,000. So whichever way you cut it, you're going to be saving a lot of money. When you factor that in, you're getting really good value because you're getting an in-house movement from an established watchmaker and you're getting that great look. So what that does, I think also it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to decide which variant you want, or maybe forking out a little bit more and getting a precious metal one. They do a really nice two-tone rose gold, which I think is beautiful. And also if you look at it, put it in the context of the time, you see the Nautilus that came out a year after, you can see sort of how the Nautilus is a lot more rounded than the AP, but the Laureato is right in between. You know, it still has that nice geometric design to it, but it is a little bit softer, maybe not as sharp as the lines on the Royal Oak. So in that sense, I think it actually is a much more elegant watch from a brand that's not currently in the mainstream. Obviously, you know, the Royal Oak and the Patek are really getting a lot of hype these days, whereas the Girard Perregaux is a lot more low-key, so I think that would be a better conversation starter. Now, moving on from the Laureato, we have a watch that's completely different from the first three on this list, and you might wonder why I'm including it, but the reality is that most people think that the Royal Oak is what established the concept of a luxury stainless steel watch, you know, a sports watch, something you can use in so many different areas, something that today is still just as useful in a suit as it is in casual wear. But the reality is it wasn't the one that started that. For all the hype it gets, in my opinion, what started that idea was the Cartier Santos. And that was in 1904, full 68 years before the AP even broke ground. Now the Santos, which is the reference WSSA009, obviously it's a square design, it's not round or octagonal, but what I love about it is that it is such a classic design. This is something that's remained largely the same since 1904, which is when it was released. And with this new modern iteration, what I love that they've done is they've added even more versatility to it. So they've given it their quick switch system, which makes it really easy to resize the bracelet, switch it out for a leather strap that it also comes with. And it's something that, in my opinion, is a lot more elegant while still maintaining that sporty character. The Santos just has that style with that deco dial, those numbers, and the pedigree behind it. On top of that, it's now offered with an in-house movement. For the longest time, they were using ETA movements or modified ETAs. Now they have the caliber 1847 MC, which is their in-house movement. And on top of that, this is also the thinnest of all these watches. This is only 9mm tall. So when you're leaning more towards the dressy side, this is a much better option because it'll fit under more cuffs. So for those reasons, I definitely think that the Cartier Santos is a viable contender. And when you consider its price point, it's $6,800, it's definitely a really good value, both compared to the Royal Oak as well as compared to some of the other contenders on this list. So it should merit your consideration if you're willing to deviate a little bit from that sort of octagonal rounded shape that most of these watches have and go into something that looks completely different. Now, last on the list is the Zenith Defy Classic. Now, this is also the newest watch on the list. It was released just last year in 2018, and it is part of a resurgent effort that Zenith has under the direction of Jean-Claude Biver and LVMH. The reference 95.9000.670/51.M9000 is the plain Jane Zenith Defy in terms of it's not skeletonized, it's not a chrono, which again for Zenith is something a bit surprising because obviously it's always known, you know, for the El Primero, but it's a beautiful, beautiful watch. But for me, the big highlight is the construction, which again is titanium, so it's super light, and the movement. 4 of the 5 watches on this list have see-through case backs, so you can admire the movement, but hands down, this is the one with the best looking movement. That beautiful stylized rotor in the shape of the Zenith star. You've got skeletonized bridges, so you can really look through all of the movement and see what's going on. The Elite 670 SK movement is completely in-house for Zenith. It's different from the El Primero, of course, which is the one that they're most recognized for, but it's still an amazing movement when you consider that this is only $6,900. So this is cheaper than the Hublot, cheaper than the Girard Perregaux if you're talking new pricing, but you're still getting an in-house movement from a company that's known for being a solid watchmaker and movement maker. And it's a watch also that's a bit off the beaten path. Zenith may be experiencing resurgence right now, or at least an effort to resurge, but it is still not a mainstream option. So that's one thing that's a big appeal, and especially if you want to get something different, get a conversation starter, I think the Defy Classic is a great option as well. So those are my 5 alternatives to the Royal Oak. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I will say which one would be my choice if it was my money. And for me, I would look to the Aikon because I do think it's a great value proposition, but I'd probably want to save a little bit more and wait a little bit more and get the Zenith. And the reason for that is that A, it's a brand that's not, your average, Omega, Rolex, typically known brand. So I do like that it is something a little bit different. And B, just you look at the craftsmanship that goes into that movement, the fact that you can see it, the fact that I think that in future Zenith will come back and maybe make a new name for itself, but the fact that it's still a brand that has that great heritage, I would think twice and think maybe I should get a Girard Perregaux secondhand. But the reality is that I think unless I was getting one of the two-tone models, I would be there thinking, I'd prefer to look at the movement of the Zenith. Now, it's a completely aesthetic choice, but again, that's just my opinion. So let me know in the comments what you would get out of these 5 alternatives. Or maybe you would just wait and stay on the waiting list or continue saving up and get the AP. In any case, let me know, because I'd love to know what you guys think and what other options you think are out there as alternatives for the Royal Oak. Now, if you like this video, please do like it and please do share it as well so we can grow the channel. And if you like the content that I'm putting out, also subscribe, as I do put out new videos every week. And hopefully in the next few weeks, I should be putting out 2 videos every week as well. But in any case, thanks for watching another episode of Luxuryality.